today. Next slide, please, Geraldine. I'd like to introduce our team, and if I can invite my colleagues to unmute themselves and introduce themselves. So if I hand over to Amanda, please.
Oh yes, sorry, I just joined. Hello everybody, so I'm Amanda Clubley, I'm the Long-Term Conditions Senior Manager in Berkshire West.
Fantastic. And Geraldine.
Hi everybody, I'm Geraldine, I'm an AHP Project Manager, and just to let you know, sorry, I've just started recording the session as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as you may gather, Geraldine is our technical support today, who's brought this event together and is running everything in the background for us. Do we have Gemma Donnelly on the call? She's our Director of Allied Health Professionals and Clinical Leadership and instigated these conversations with Heike first that generated to make this webinar come about. And if I hand over to Heike to introduce herself.
Thanks, Sajida. I'm Heike Feldman, a GP out in West Berkshire, but also here in capacity as the CVD lead for Bob.
Fantastic. And finally, Rachel, please.
Hi there, I'm Rachel Johnson. I'm the Integrated Stroke Delivery Network Lead, but I also work very closely on the CVD prevention programme across the ICB.
Amazing, thank you. So next slide, please, Geraldine. So before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. So as Geraldine has mentioned, we are recording this webinar for colleagues that are not able to attend, but also as a future resource for us as well. Please do keep your microphones muted during presentation so we can ensure a high quality sound. We encourage lots of questions, so please submit them via the chat box at any time, and we'll address them as each speaker ends their presentation. And depending on time management, they can always refer back to the chat box. If you think of something later, please do pop it in the chat box. Next slide, please. So this is just reminding everyone of our agenda, and later in the session we are going to have breakout rooms, so we're really keen to hear and learn from you. So yes, looking forward to that session too. And next slide, please. These are our shared learning objectives that we're hoping to be able to deliver during this webinar. Blood pressure remains one of the most significant modifiable risk factors for cardiovascular disease worldwide. And despite advances in treatment, challenges persist, detection gaps, adherence issues, and health inequalities. So in today's webinar, we really want to explore practical strategies for AHPs to support patients in prevention, diagnosis, and long-term management as your touch point wherever you're working across the service. I hope that's been enough time to read the learning objectives. I don't want to read all of them, so I'll just leave that slide there for just another minute. After each presentation, as I said, we're inviting questions from yourselves, so please do raise that virtual hand up and continue using that chat box with as many queries as possible. It's going to be really lovely to hear from you. So we're moving towards 12:35. So I'd like to invite our first speaker, Heike, and she's going to be discussing understanding blood pressure and its importance. Over to you, Heike.
Excellent. Thanks for that intro, Sajida. I'll drive my own slides and hopefully Geraldine won't need the backing up of our technical support. Let's see how I get on. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can. It's not on.
I'll put it on slide.
Perfect. Thank you.
There we go.
Perfect.
So thank you, colleagues, for this opportunity to speak to you about cardiovascular disease and the importance of hypertension. My key thing that I'd like to get to you today is just how straightforward hypertension is and management, and how all of us can play an important role in getting a better outcome. We started by asking this question to just the lay community in Oxford, and I was absolutely surprised at how many different answers people came up with. What does heart health mean to me? From it means everything. It's the foundation of life. it's freedom, you know, to be able to do things, a longer life, to being able to exercise, stress less, have blood pressure checks. And to be fair, it is all of these things, you know, and it just shows how different things are important to different people. And I'd like us to remember this, because we need to speak to what is important to the person to help them feel engaged and make hypertension or high blood pressure something that is all of our problem. That video tells us is that hypertension is a product of internal and external factors that we need to be aware of. External factors are the things that we can do something about, that's within our gift to change. And the internal factors are slightly more difficult, because that's what our grandparents have handed down to us. So our genetic makeup, how we manage stress, and all of us working in the NHS are very familiar with stress. And then also the responsibilities that we hold within the home. But then external factors, as I mentioned, and hopefully colleagues will be speaking to you a bit later about the importance of nutrition, what we eat, the importance of taking some physical activity, and that will even help address some of the stress that we have in our lives, smoking less alcohol. And this is a simple leaflet that is in our pack that we'll be handing out to yourselves about how to check blood pressure. A simple diagram that you'd be able to either send as a text to your patients, to their relatives, or email it to them, or if you so want, a paper copy. It just reminds us what that good practice is. You need to sit down calmly, not have the 6 o'clock news on, because that is not calming, not be sipping on your cup of coffee, and then take the best out of 2 or 3 readings. So the lowest out of 2 or 3 readings. And in general, if we could remember this as what normal is. Firstly, let's start with what is abnormal, a high blood pressure reading. So if you go away today with just one set of numbers, 140 over 90 would be that. That is our watershed mark. If your blood pressure is persistently over 140 over 90, we would consider that a high blood pressure that's needing intervention. Intervention generally starts first off with lifestyle interventions. But if lifestyle interventions do not make an adequate change, we do need to add in some medication alongside continuing the lifestyle changes. Here we traffic light the blood pressure ranges, because our blood pressure is supposed to vary depending on what we get up to during the day. And when we laid down, so sleeping overnight, your blood pressure would be even lower. When we stand up, our heart needs to pump blood to all the muscles to get us moving, so our blood pressure increases. And yet again, I stress, so your blood pressure would vary during the day depending on what you get up to, which meeting you're in, how the traffic is driving to work, how the kids are behaving. But if it is persistently above 140 over 90, that would be considered a high blood pressure. This is just another schematic representation of that. And for me, yet again, we need to understand the simplest form. So look at the colors and the numbers. We try and simplify it so that everybody can understand. Because if your 9-year-old child can explain to grandma or grandpa why and what high blood pressure is, we are onto a winner, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this comes to the part of why is CVD prevention important and how it affects us disproportionately from an inequalities perspective. Sajida mentioned at the beginning, this is one of the leading cause of death in the UK. And we know that a high proportion of that, over 70%, is preventable by earlier intervention. And preventable is thinking of if we could avoid or reduce the risk of a heart attack or stroke under the age of 70. So we know that our current position of how well we are managing hypertension in the Southeast, which is the area that we're in, is about 65%. So when I mention well-managed hypertension, what does that mean? So firstly, you are known to have hypertension. So this is when your GP has made the diagnosis and said, you have hypertension, and is on the GP's list, you know, as part of your health record, noted to be hypertensive. What we're saying, once you are known to be hypertensive, it is essential that we control your blood pressure well. And that is what we're measuring here. So what we're saying in the Southeast, so that stretches from London right up to...
I'm happy to be at home having a dinner.
Is controlled at 65%. And what we're aiming for is 80% blood pressure control. I spoke to you about how deprivation and ethnicity has a disproportionate impact on people having hypertension. And in the next few slides, I will go into depth of that. The slide at the bottom here, although it is very small and the numbers are even smaller, what I want you to know is that Bob is represented in the deep blue. So the first column, and this is looking at how well controlled our blood pressure is by ethnicity. And just on this column, we can clearly see that in Bob, our Black Afro-Caribbean is probably the least well controlled out of all the different areas. This is a missing cohort, so without any ethnicity attached to it. Some more statistics, because I know some of you absolutely crave and live off this. So the numbers that you might want to know as a healthcare professional. This comes from our Office of National Statistics, and it looks at mortality rates, so age standardized mortality rates. For people known with hypertensive disease, people who have had a stroke, who have had a myocardial infection. And you can see that above all, highest on the risk for hypertensive disease, our Bangladeshi population, Black Caribbean, Pakistani, Indian, for hypertensive diagnosis. And a similar pattern is translated in stroke-related and myocardial infarction-related deaths as compared to our white British or Irish population, which is down here. Just hammering home on the point of how other health inequalities also play a role. This is looking at areas of deprivation. Now, deprivation is looked into 10 deciles, 1 being the most deprived decile and 10 being the least deprived decile. So you can clearly see here, yet again reflecting on hypertensive stroke and myocardial infarction, how our patient population living in the most deprived areas, deciles 1 and 2, are disproportionately affected as compared to our wealthier areas, deciles 8, 9, and 10 in each of these areas. So back in about 2022, our UCL partners came up with this, which I still think is one of the best pieces of work done. This is the size of the prize, and it's health economics. All too often in medicine, we shy away from speaking about the pounds and pence, but we all know that that affects not only how the staffing is, but also the workload. Looking at the size of the prize here, we are looking at if we get that hypertension control at any of these levels. So 70%, 74, 77, 80. Here you can clearly see what happened during the years, the COVID years. how that control dipped right down to 51%, and how we are still clawing our way back. Our aim across Bob is to get to 80% control. So known hypertensives, well controlled with a blood pressure below 140/90. And what this health economic slide tells us that if we were to achieve 80% across Bob, over the next 3 years, we would be saving 210 heart attacks. We would be saving over 300 strokes. And then they put some millions of pounds attached to that. But you and I both know, and I'm sure that around this virtual table, there's not one of us who don't know an immediate relative or a friend who has had a heart attack or stroke. So this brings it really close to us. And I would venture to say that most of us also live in the Berkshire, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire area. So this makes it relative to all of us around this virtual table, of why it is important to each of us as clinicians, but also as patients, and how to get that 80% control. Now, this next slide looks at our patients with known hypertension across the Bob area. So the Bob population is just shy of 2 million people. And of those 2 million people, there's some 260,000 who are known to have hypertension. 260,000. It is a mammoth amount. And that's why you can see that this cannot just be managed with primary care, your local GP, why it requires us as a whole population to work towards that 80% target. This is a population profile. So what do these 260,000 people look like on average, if you were to put it on a page? And this is what it would look like. The average age, 68.5 years. 22% make up of our ethnic minority group. The majority are males. However, this percentage of females is statistically higher if you look at the total population from Frimley and including Bob. In Bob, we are in a slightly more affluent area, with that deprivation decile being at 7.4. Remember, I spoke to how our more deprived areas are disproportionately affected. So in Bob, we're fortunate to have a nice area, but all of us around this virtual table know that we've been into homes where the deprivation is high and are in need of our intervention. So of these people, they have on average an extra 4 other long-term conditions. Multi-generational household, 8% smokers. And this is very important because the national aim that we have regarding smoking is to try and get it below 5. And we know that the smoking varies from less than 5% in certain areas to above 30% in others. So there's huge variation for us to get to this 8% number there. And then another very important measure, people with a body mass index of greater than 35, we've got near on 15% of our population of hypertensives that fall into that category. And so this is all of the slides where there's numbers here I've extracted from Connected Care. This is a data set that's available to all the healthcare professionals, especially primary care, secondary care. This is looking to see how is Bob doing towards reaching that target of 80%. So there's the line of 80%. You can see this is that's the end of the financial year. So it goes financial year to financial year. And what this is doing is comparing year on year, how are we doing? So the green is the most recent year. This is 2025 that we're working in. 2024-25 is the purple line. And then the blue line is the year 23-24. The good news of this is year on year, we are doing fractionally better. But it is still far shy from that 80%. I think that we just reached about 70% total to an end of 24-25. And the key message that we were trying to get across to all of our GP practices, and how I hope that you will also be able to help, is that we need to get there faster earlier on in the year. So we won't be able to reach 80 if we just keep on to this trajectory. We need to be doing work earlier and faster. So you can see that that green line is tracking just slightly above where we are. But if we continue just doing what we're currently doing, we won't reach that 80% target, that's for sure. We need to do something special and pull something out of our backpack to really make a significant difference. And that's why I'm really hoping that colleagues, you'll be able to help us on this venture. And this is just a reminder slide, maybe a slide that you can leave up for colleagues that are not here, as to say how this cardiovascular disease is real. Just with a few shocking statistics, nearly 30% of adults have high blood pressure. The main campaign this year for Know Your Numbers was to find the missing 5 million. They think that there's some 5 million people out there in the UK that have hypertension that don't even know it, because we can only control it if we know about it. Every 8 minutes, someone in the UK dies due to some form of coronary heart disease. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I really hope that I've inspired you to know not only what is hypertension. If we're going to do that little video, or even if we send you the link at the end, how does it come about, and what can we do? Those internal and external factors, knowing full well how certain parts of our population are disproportionately affected. And hopefully it's within our gift to share that message that if you're known to have hypertension, the importance of having it well controlled. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heike. What we will do is, apologies for the technical hitch, but where's a webinar when we don't have a technical hitch? We'll place that video in the chat for you guys. But Sarah, Heike, I was just thinking of the 2 million population that we've got across Bob and 260,000 unknown. I wonder how many of them are unknown. And with blood pressure kind of being that asymptomatic condition, I think, being able to have those conversations would be really useful. Does anybody have any questions for Heike? Please do put your virtual hand up. We'll be monitoring the chat, and I'm sure Heike can go into the chat and answer those questions. Okay, so just to run on schedule, I would now like to invite Sarah Ryland, who's a lead dietetic prescribing advisor here at the Bob ICB, and she is going to discuss diet and blood pressure. Over to you, Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm just uploading my presentation now, so hopefully it will pop up on the screen in a second.
Perfect, that's worked. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll just move my slides over. Okay, so the main things that I was going to discuss today was around salt, alcohol, weight and physical activity. So I'm sure that's not a surprise to see those topics on our agenda for today. So people who have a lot of salt in their diet are more likely to have a high blood pressure. Adults should have no more than 6 grams of salt a day, and that's approximately 1 teaspoon. It's the sodium in the salt that contributes to high blood pressure, and it is present in all types of salt, including sea salt, sea salt flakes, crystals and flavoured salt as well. Some people may opt for a salt substitute. It can be useful to use these to eat less sodium, but it won't help somebody get used to a less salty taste. They are also not suitable for everybody. So, for example, for those with kidney problems or heart failure, or if you take particular medications, those salt substitutes may not be suitable. Like I said, most of you will understand that there is obviously a relationship between salt and high blood pressure. What I wanted to think about is if you were trying to explain that to a patient, how you would do so. So when you come out of the webinar today, if that does come up in one of your consultations, so you're checking someone's blood pressure and you note that it's high, and you're thinking about that first line intervention, so those lifestyle factors, if you start to explore somebody's salt, intake, it sometimes helps, because patients will probably know themselves that they should need to think about their salt intake, but they may not understand the relationship between how it actually affects their blood pressure. So this slide is trying to give you those tools to have those conversations with patients and have those explanations to hand. So salt affects the kidneys, which helps regulate the blood pressure by controlling how much water stays in your body. If you eat too much salt, your body holds on to that water, and this extra fluid increases the pressure in your blood vessels. It's like turning up the pressure in a garden hose. I think that's quite a good analogy to share with patients. And then I've also got a video that I'm not going to attempt to play. I was too scared to do that because of technical things. But again, it's a link that after a consultation, if you've had that conversation with the patient, you can share that with them and they can go back and review that to get that understanding. Top tips to help somebody to reduce their salt intake is to think about what types of snacks, if they are somebody that are including snacks in their diet, are they eating things like crisps or salted nuts or other salty snacks? Trying to replace those or switch them to other options such as rice cakes, using fruit or vegetable sticks or unsalted nuts as a healthy alternative snack. If they are having more convenience things, so things like soups can taste really nice if they're pre-prepared, but they often have added salt to them. So again, thinking about the frequency that somebody is including that type of food in their diet. Also sauces, so things like any condiments like brown sauce, ketchup, mustard, soy sauce, gravy, all those things that taste really nice but will have a lot of additional salt in. Trying to think of using potentially the reduced salt options, but again, that won't help somebody potentially get used to the taste of having less salt in their diet, or trying to use smaller portion sizes can be useful switches for patients. And think about if there's somebody that are using takeaways or having ready meals more regularly in their diet, they often have more salt in them. So thinking about, is there an opportunity to reduce the frequency of those types of foods? Or if that's really not possible, because I think we know there's lots of different influences that influence someone's food choices or, cooking facilities, etc. That may not be a possible switch for somebody. So thinking about reading food labels, which we'll come on to. Also things like sandwich fillings, trying to reduce the frequency that you're having those more processed foods in your diet. So things like ham, the salami, trying to go for lean cuts of meat where possible, fish, those kind of things as an alternative as well. And other simple things like trying to make sure that when you are cooking, try not to add salt in the cooking process. Don't have salt cellars and things on the table. Try and use other ways of flavouring foods. So using herbs, spices instead of salt. This slide is again just a refresher of some other common, I guess, foods that will have higher salt content. So thinking about when you are including cheese and butter. So if you're adding them at an end of a cooking process, trying to reduce the quantity of those things because that will be topping up salt intake. Again, the sauces are on there, things like fish sauce, ketchup, all those kind of things, trying to limit how much you use. Simple things, if you're having toast regularly in your diet, think about what you're adding and putting on top of it. So if you're somebody that likes Marmite, for instance, or any other yeast extract, it tastes lovely, doesn't it? But it's very, very salty. And again, if it's used on a regular basis, can contribute to someone's daily salt intake. Things like breads as well. I think I was just if you make a loaf of bread at home, you may just use 1 teaspoon of salt for that whole loaf. Whereas if you're buying bread, that can be, that's going to have a significantly higher salt intake or contribute to your salt intake. So thinking about trying to read food labels and look at those options that have the least amount of salt in it as well. And salty nibbles, so things like capers, olives, anchovies. If you're going out for dinner, you might, have an antipasta starter. Think about what things you're choosing. If your patient has got high blood pressure, those things again will be contributing to salt intake. And sweet surprises, I think there's a real trend for things like salted caramel, those kind of things. Think about again checking the labeling if you are having those foods because they will contribute to someone's overall salt intake. So like I mentioned about food labels, I'm sure most of you see, on the front of packaging, there is often this traffic light system, which will help you understand how much salt is in a portion of food. So legally, since 2016, all manufacturers of prepackaged food have to put that nutrition information on the back of a packet, and it's typically listed per 100 grams or per 100 mils, and they have to tell us the fat, saturated fat, carbohydrate, sugar and protein and salt content of a food. Some products will also have this front of packaging labeling as well, which is much easier, I guess, to read and quickly be able to compare products, but you need to think about whether it's what portion size you're comparing to as well. So trying to encourage patients where, you know, if cooking from scratch isn't a viable option for them, or, you know, there's all things that we probably all buy on a regular basis that we know we're not going to prepare at home, encourage people to take the time to read those food